Welcome to Contradicting the Cosmos, the show where I refute the YouTube atheist, the Cosmic Skeptic. In a heart-wrenching episode of the Cosmic Skeptic, Mr. Cosmic makes an impassioned plea for the separation of church and state. Let's begin.
Have you ever noticed that there's a stunning correlation between a person's place of birth and their religious affiliation? Have you ever noticed that there's a stunning correlation between someone's parents' religious beliefs and their own? I can't count the amount of times that upon asking a theist why they subscribe to a particular religion, that I've been met with the response of, well, that's just because I was born into it. It's amazing how oftentimes religious people can so effortlessly point out the flaws in the doctrines of others, yet fail entirely to apply precisely the same rudimentary critical thinking to their own faith. I used to respond to this assertion by trying to point out that it's a logical fallacy and that surely they can see that their faith is so obviously completely dependent upon their geography, but it never seems to get through. Why is this? Why are so many religious people so insular and dedicated, despite knowing that they only believe in their arbitrary god because they were canalized into doing so?
Oh, the music is so sad. He's trying to appeal to my emotion. Well, it's not gonna work. No, seriously, it's not gonna work. So let's put aside the obvious appeal to emotion for a moment and get to the actual argument he's trying to make. A person's faith is not dependent on their geography, as even the slightest bit of common sense would tell you. There are Christians, Muslims, and atheists all over the world. There are people who claim to have been Christians who are now atheists. There are Christians who used to be Muslims. Did they suddenly change religions because they changed geography? No. Just because you're born into Christianity doesn't mean it's wrong. There are people who are born into atheism. Are you gonna assume that's wrong as well? A lot of people in every religion do not often think about why they believe what they believe. But to say their belief is wrong, or more specifically, to say that Christianity is wrong because some Christian you met wasn't able to give a good reason for Christianity, that is merely an ad hominem. It does not prove atheism or disprove Christianity. People can come to the right conclusion by irrational means.
If a Christian is asked why they believe in their God and they say, well, it's just because they were brought up to, or they derive comfort from it, or they just feel as though it's right, well, that's perfectly acceptable. Why should anybody need to justify their beliefs? This is almost something I can get behind, but let's not forget that it's these beliefs which are infiltrating the politics of the masses and the education of children. If you want to argue that your religion should be taught in schools, and that scientific evidence should be ignored in favour of ancient superstition, well then I'm sorry, but you're going to have to do a little better than that.
The only religious belief creeping into schools is the belief of evolutionism. All other religions are being pushed out of school. In fact, if you just listen to the second half of that clip out of context, you would think he was talking about evolution. Except, of course, for that one line of ancient superstition. Evolutionism isn't necessarily ancient.
Keep their religions to themselves, then they shouldn't necessarily be expected to justify their reasoning. That's not what I'm trying to argue. I just wish that people wanted to. I wish that we could live in an educational environment which promotes skepticism and freedom of thought, one in which no ideology is held beyond the ability to criticize, one which expels bad ideas and promotes no particular religious dogma and teaches children that, yes, your beliefs are probably just fine, but guess what? So are other people's.
That would be idiotic. Putting aside the fact that that would necessarily be an atheistic worldview, to say that what a person believes doesn't matter, which of course means he's begging the question, but putting that aside, an Islamic fundamentalist believes that he should kill you because you do not believe Islam. You are not a Muslim, therefore, by his belief, you should die. Do you seriously think that that is okay? Other people's beliefs are not just fine. You can't just sweep it all under the rug. Any belief that goes against truth is not fine. Some are less fine than others. If you believe the sky is blue because it reflects the ocean, that's fine. It's not true, but that belief won't have any negative effects on either you or anybody else. If, on the other hand, you believe that the Quran is true, look out. That is a dangerous belief, and it is not just fine.
If this was a universal reality, albeit quite a quixotic one, but don't you think that radicalization, religious authoritarianism, and holy wars would all be a thing of the past? That's the thing. Secularism doesn't equate to atheism. Secularism benefits everybody. Yes, it protects my right to be an atheist, but it also protects my friend's right to be a Muslim. Secularism just means that each of these rights doesn't undermine or infringe upon other rights, and that includes a child's right to a scientific education, or their right to abstain from pledging allegiance every morning to a god that they don't believe in.
Okay, first of all, the Pledge of Allegiance is to America, or the flag of America. It is not pledging allegiance to God. Secondly, no one has the right to an education, scientific or otherwise. You may be able to argue for it based on the pursuit of happiness, but it is not a constitutional right. And secularism is necessarily atheistic, because secularism believes in the impossible of completely separating government from religion. But such a separation is not possible due to the nature of religion. When they cut out the history told in Genesis, they end up filling it with the pseudoscience known as evolution. You are trading one religion for another. If you really want a secular society, then maybe you should try getting government out of the school system. Privatize all schooling. No public schools. Of course, in doing that, you may find that the next generation ends up being smart enough to see through the lies of evolution.
The founding fathers of the United States were strictly secular. We hear so often that the country was founded on Christian values, despite John Adams himself once stating that the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. As noted in an article from the Huffington Post on the issue, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the Federalist Papers, and the Constitution, the four most important documents in American history, all unambiguously prove the country's secular origins. The Founding Fathers were completely aware of the dangers associated with a religious state, which is why they were so explicit in trying to prevent it. But despite this, every single president of the United States has been a Christian, save Jefferson and Lincoln, but even they were religiously ambiguous, so they could, in theory, still fit the bill. Look at the division that exists in modern society. Look at the scientific illiteracy of our children. Look at the influence of a Christian God upon a constitutionally secular state. And then look me in the eye and tell me that we don't need secularism now more than ever. I may be an atheist, but I'm a secularist before I'm an atheist. I don't want to force kids to abandon their religion. I just want to create an environment in which they can choose to make that decision for themselves.
By stacking the deck in favor of atheism. If you really want the government to stay out of religion, then you will have to get the government out of school. And this is where he doubles down hard on his appeal to emotion, trying to claim that strife and poor education is somehow the result of some perceived conflict between God and a secular constitution. But the Constitution is not secular. Right there in the Bill of Rights, it says that they are inalienable rights given to us by our Creator. So the Constitution admits God exists. The only separation that the Constitution allows for is prohibiting the government from forcing people into any particular religion. But by forcing out organized religions, you're still left with the unorganized religions. And I would say that John Adams was wrong. The United States government is, in at least one sense, founded on the Christian religion. That is, the majority of the people who wrote and signed the Constitution were Christians. I won't bother trying to argue whether or not the United States is actually founded on Christianity. But I am also not going to make the foolish statement that it had nothing to do with it. And lastly, in addition to making an appeal to emotion fallacy, he makes the false cause fallacy by claiming that the effect of a Christian God on a secular constitution is causing all those problems he tried to point out. But this is faulty reasoning for two reasons. One, correlation does not prove causation, and two, his correlation is backwards, since the illiteracy has gone up with the rise of evolutionism. The more you take God out of schools, the more illiterate they become. Now that may not prove causation, but it is a better correlation than the one he provided.